Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot be a functional society if we have the highest crime rate in the world. We cannot be a functional society if we continually have to listen to rhetoric and not see action. We cannot be a functional economy if criminals are removing bread from the mouths of the needy. We cannot be a just and responsible society if we neglect those millions of victims of crime. We cannot allow ourselves to be held at ransom by a criminal minority in this country. Crime is South Africa's biggest and most pressing problem. Crime is not just a political issue, but it has already become a human rights issue. Governments' intransigence of not admitting that today crime is the biggest problem in South Africa and that it will remain so unless it displays a moral responsibility. This is the reality. This is where we are right now. Victims of crime must not only demand that their rights should not be violated, but they have the duty and moral responsibility to demand that those rights are honored. According to the United Nations Basic Principles of Justice for Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power, and to which South Africa is a signatory, I believe, victims of crime should in all circumstances demand, amongst other, access to justice and fair treatment. This means that victims should be treated with compassion and respect for their dignity. This means that they are entitled to access to the mechanisms of justice and to prompt redress for the harm that they have suffered. Victims should demand redress through formal or informal procedures that are expeditious, fair, inexpensive and accessible. Victims should be informed of their rights in seeking redress through such mechanisms. Victims of crime should demand that they be informed of the role and scope, timing and progress of the proceedings and the disposition of their cases, especially where serious crimes are involved and where they have requested such information. They should demand that their views and concerns are presented and considered at appropriate stages of the proceedings where their personal interests are affected. They should demand proper assistance throughout the legal process. They should demand the government take measures to minimize inconvenience to victims, protect their privacy when necessary, and ensure their safety, as well as that of their families and witnesses on their behalf, from intimidation and retaliation. Victims of crime should demand that a sustainable victims fund is established to compensate victims who have suffered due to serious crime. Ladies and gentlemen, I've always maintained that life is about choices. For we have a choice at this symposium and in our daily lives. We can accept the influence of everyday crime and do nothing. We can look on as the number of victims increases exponentially. We can talk about an unfortunate and bizarre comment made by some politician asleep at the helm and just shake our heads. We can read the papers every day and wonder when this rampage of carnage will ever cease. We can reassess our personal safety situation in this country and come to the unfortunate conclusion to leave it short. That we can do. Or at this moment, and at this symposium, we can put our hands together and say, no, today, we want to talk about the plight of victims of crime all over South Africa, whether they be black, white, brown, Asian. Today we want to talk about those forgotten peoples and reject the notion that they are somebody else's problem. Victims of crime should be our concern, and we cannot allow them to slip from our grasp, not today. Today we want to talk about victims of crime who has also become secondary victims. Today we must talk about the manner in which they are treated by police stations or at some welfare office, who do not have the ways, means and power to overcome the bureaucracy. But together we can shift mountains and assist those victims of crime. Today we want to talk about men, women and children who are continuously subjected to the most hideous acts. We want to talk about new and proactive measures to assist victims of crime, and to demand that their rights under the Constitution are protected. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, during these proceedings you will hear from experts in the field of victims of crime and victimology. You will be a witness to the testimony of prominent South African victims of violent crime and how their lives have been placed in jeopardy. Let us listen and assess their input, and thereby realize our individual and combined responsibility to these people. With this symposium, it is our combined conviction and prayer that the outcome will renew the focus on crime, and specifically the plight of victims of crime. Let us work together to make the symposium a success and endeavour to develop a blueprint to empower victims of crime through meaningful and practical programs. The symposium is not an event. It is a continuous process to make the peoples of South Africa and the world aware of the unfortunate trauma suffered by millions of people due to criminal attacks. Chairperson, Nakisa accepts that he does not possess all the answers. But what we do know and experience is that we do care and we do display a collective commitment to bring about meaningful change in the lives of victims of crime. However, we can only make such change if all communities stand together and realize such change. We also call on all societies, organized business, and NGOs in South Africa, as well as the international community, to assist us to apply pressure on those in government to accept their responsibility to recognize the plight of victims of crime. But above all, to make this beautiful country a safer place. Thank you very much.